We're going to solve this Yajilin called stretching the circle. It's a variation by Serkan where we've got two options for each of the clues, and we're going to have to figure out which option is the forced one. Just looking at the start, some of the things I'm going to want to do is just mark in general cells that can't get shaded to sort of at least highlight some of the pressures in the grid. Some of these corner cells near these isolated spaces can't get shaded because they will isolate parts of the grid. I think that's a good start for what we're doing there. One of the things that it puts in there, I guess two cells at a lot of tension, this 3 and the 0, and this other 3 and the 0 look to be in a lot of tension, and particularly this 3 to the right looks like we can quickly invalidate it. The only ways we can still shade 3 cells is going straight across, but we then put an isolated cell right there, which is no good. So this has to take 3 cells coming up, which would be 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and then the 0 has to be a vertical clue. And so we've got the start to the grid is marked in. And these clues fulfilled. We've got, and I will just turn on surface and come back to like shading these in green, so it's we know when we've marked those off. The next thing to think through is really probably this 3 clue, because it looks like the down is always forced to be off because there are only 2 cells left for it. So this has to take 3 cells over to the right. We could take 1 or 2 in this space, and we can take 1 or 2 in this space. But one of the constraints you'll get used to seeing in this kind of tight zone is if we actually take both of these cells, we're going to form a real problem with a cell here. It's going to have to come to the left, come to the top, and also come to the right. So we've made a 3-way cell in that shading. So I can only take a maximum of 1 over here. So I always have to take 2 in this middle space. And in thinking through that, I actually have some cells I can't take. For instance, I can't take this cell because right now I'd actually daisy chain to these placements. So I would take this square, and it also seems I can't take this cell because I would daisy chain to these. So I know this for sure at this stage, which gives me a good start to part of the puzzle. That actually tells me for sure this is actually 3. This 3 could be to the right or up, but what I know is for sure the 0 isn't to the left. So this 0 is going up, and we then have fulfilled that clue. That now coming back to our shading where we need to take 1 more over on this far right side forces it to be this cell here. And we've got some more options after doing that, but we can come back to some of the clues we've looked at and say where, will this be a 3 coming to the right or this be a 3 coming up? One thing to see is right now this cell can't be shaded. We'd again form a multi-way junction, in this case actually a 4-way junction with the cells around it, so this pattern looks to be the one that's actually forced. And in marking that in, this 3 up is no longer valid. It only has 2 maximum cells it can take, so these cells instead always are shaded. That puts in this channel, puts this in up. These clues are going to come around. These ends need to extend, and this one's going to have to come into the middle. So this is a forced pattern in the space. This upper right clue now has a lot of constraints to be filled here. While there are 3 cells to take, you can't take 2 that are 1 away on an edge. So the only way we can get 3 cells shaded is to come across and mark these in for it, which gives us these space. This upper right section is going to have 1 more end come into the space, but if that's the end here, this is going to close off on itself. So this is the end that comes in, this comes across, comes down. Notice these 2 ends are the same end, potentially when they join back, so they're going to have to stay apart for the loop to work. So these 2 ends stay apart as these 2 ends. These ends then also have to keep staying apart, so as we work into this part of the grid, we need to have something like this play forward. And I think there's a lot more we can do as we keep working through that, but let's not overrun our progress. Let's think about what more we know. This 3 can't be down, so it has to be to the left, so there's a clue there, and so we've actually fulfilled these clues, we've fulfilled this clue. We can think about this 2, and in thinking about this 2, again, we said this end has to come out and not into the space, so when I mark this in, this 2 has to actually take ends over to the right. If I shaded this cell, I'd make a 3-way junction. So this has to come here, and if I shaded this cell, I'd make a 3-way junction. So the extremes are what get used. These ends dodge, bend around, connect like so. So I've actually fulfilled this. This one doesn't have any cells to the right, so it has to take this cell here to the left. That looks fine. This 2 still needs to get fulfilled, so that's going to be probably the key constraint as these come up. We've got to put one more cell in this column, but it can't be this opposite pattern, so it's this pattern. So these loop ends dodge, this comes up and corners, and putting in the last loop connections in the last shaded cell, we finish the grid. So this was really solved by carefully looking at each of the clues, finding the ones that were most constrained, eliminating one of the options. It started from getting this 3 to the right removed, getting some cells in the middle of the grid. I think the packing of multiple squares on the far right of this grid and then these loop ends connecting were the last key things to observe. But a lot of fun deductions through this unusual Yajilin challenge. Thanks, Serkan, for writing it, and hopefully you got something out of this video. We'll see you again soon.